Welcome back, guys. This is Dr. Chris Erskine, and we're going to talk about the beginnings of the Civil War and girding for war. First slide I want you to look at, South Carolina, April 12, 1861. Now you can see on the bottom picture here, what we have is a fort, and it doesn't look like a big fort, and that's because it wasn't. It's called Fort Sumter. And Fort Sumter was the fort that was in the Charleston Harbor, and you can see on the map on the top right corner of this that Fort Sumter is out there in the middle of the ocean. Now you might need to pause the video and look closely, but you can see that there's a series of 3 or 4 forts there in Charleston, South Carolina, that were intended to protect South Carolina from being attacked. Now, if you also remember, in December 20, so that would be December, January, February, March, April, so we're talking about 4 or 5 months that South Carolina has claimed to no longer be part of the United States. But these forts, Fort Sumter anyway, is still manned by, or there are still soldiers in there from the United States, not from the new Confederate States of America. And so here's the question. What do we do? Does Abraham Lincoln bring those soldiers home to a state that has not seceded? Or does he leave them there? This is a major question, major dilemma for President Abraham Lincoln. He's only been in office for just over 5 weeks at this point. And so he decides that he's going to send them food and clothing. And he sends the governor of South Carolina a letter and says, all I'm doing is sending them food and clothing. I'm not going to send them any guns, no ammunition, nothing to make war. And the governor of South Carolina said no. And so on April 12, South Carolina, the state of South Carolina, started the Civil War by bombing or shooting cannons on Fort Sumter for about 20, 25, 30 hours, 35 hours, somewhere in there. No one dies, though. No one dies. And this is the beginning. Now, there's other little skirmishes here or there prior to this, but this is the major, major battle. It's not even really a battle. Fort Sumter doesn't do a whole lot of return fire. They don't do a whole lot of fighting back. So this is the question. At this point, look at the next slide, the cause of war. And I want to pause. We're going to talk about the war in this chapter, in the next chapter, but I want to pause now and think about this question. Because for the last chapter, we've talked about the lead up to the American Civil War being about slavery, the sectional struggle. People in the North don't want slavery. People in the South do want slavery. So here's the question. What is the cause of the war? Is it actually slavery? Well, people in the South said, no, it's not about slavery. It's about the North trying to tell us what to do. It's about states' rights. And so here we have the top, cause of war. Here's what a Southerner says. I'm a Union man, meaning they believe in the United States. But when they send men south to fight in my state, it will change my notions or my ideas. I can do nothing against my own people. I mean, I can't fight against, if I'm from Tennessee, I can't fight against people from Tennessee. Robert E. Lee, a very famous American general, Confederate general, says, I am one of those dull creatures that cannot see the good of secession, meaning separating. And one woman from the South said this, we claim nothing from the North, but just to be left alone. And then later she says, after the slaves are freed, she says, while there is, of course, a natural dislike for the loss of so much property, the slaves, in my inmost soul I cannot regret it. And so she didn't like losing her money, but she also believed that slaves should be free. And so here's the question. Is this war that's taking place, is it really about states' rights or is it about slavery? This is a question that you might have on an exam. It might be on your midterm exam. It might be on your final exam. But is this civil war that's just begun, is it really about states' rights or is it about slavery? This is a question every single high school student in the United States thinks about, and every student in college is asked to think about as well. And I teach my college classes. I ask my students, and we talk about this in class, was the Civil War over states' rights or slavery? And there's no easy answer, but we're going to talk a little bit about that during this lesson. Look at the next slide. Also says the cause of war. And this is a quote from Abraham Lincoln. And I'm going to read it with you, and I want you to read it with me. But I want to, before we read it, I want to say that most Americans, when they think of Abraham Lincoln, they think of him as this hero that was against slavery, who wanted to free the slaves, and they just think of him as a hero, a national hero. This quote helps us think a little bit differently about Lincoln. So let's read it. My paramount object, or my first goal, in the struggle is to save the Union, save the United States. And it is not either to save or destroy slavery. If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do because I believe it helps save the Union. And what I forbear, or what I allow, I forbear because I do not believe it would help save the Union. I have here stated my purpose according to my view and my official duty, and I intend no modification of my oft expressed personal wish that all men everywhere could be free. So he says, on one hand, as president, I have to save the Union. But my personal view is that these slaves should go free. And he says that in August of 1862. And so the question is this about slavery or is it about states' rights? Now, this is not an easy answer to consider. And often students in my classes, they will say, oh, it was about slavery. Oh, it was about states' rights. But really, it's about both, and it's also about a lot of other things. I don't know about China, but in the United States, when people decide to join the army, sometimes they join because they want to serve their country. Sometimes they join because they want to go on an adventure, or because maybe they want to travel. Or in the United States, the Army will help pay for your college after you are out of the Army. And some people join so they can get money for college. Some people join because they have no other options and no job. And some people join because their grandfather joined and because their father joined. There's so many different reasons why people will join the Army. It's not one-dimensional. Where's the person from? Are they from South Carolina? Then maybe they're fighting for states' rights. Are they from New York? Maybe they're fighting for slavery, to end slavery. Does the person own slaves? In the South, if they own slaves, are they fighting over states' rights or slavery? If they don't own slaves in the South, are they fighting over slavery or states' rights? Do they own land? So many questions that we have to ask before we can answer this question. But really, the question, states' rights or slavery, does not have one single answer. It has many answers. And the answer is that yes, it was over states' rights. And yes, it was over slavery. So they're both right. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about kind of how the war begins, and after that first battle in Fort Sumter, what happens next. And we're going to dig into that next time. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.